So this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcasting under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. The broadcasting time as posted is 0740 GMT. The actual broadcast is starting a minute or so after that. On page 15 of the I newspaper, there is a piece by Paul O, that is spelled like Evelyn O, Waugh, Paul O. And the heading is The New Junior Cronies Lording It Over Us. This is the reference to the chronological liar and crook, Boris Johnson, foisting a new list of members on the House of Peers. The front page of the Times today has got King Brian smiling as he stands next to an animal, and the caption reads, its animal is of course alpaca. It's an alpaca, not the baby angel Geronimo, but that's the same family. An alpaca at an agricultural show in Brecon, mid Wales, caught the king's attention yesterday. Charles is to give up his share of multi-billion-pound windfall profits from Britain's offshore wind farms in a deal with the government. Page 9 is the details. Now, of course, King Brian didn't have his attention caught at any point in solidarity with baby angel Geronimo, the world's best known and most innocent alpaca. Because contrary to the highly corrupt propaganda around King Brian, that he's a new kind of royal and that he's not as corrupt as the others, etc., etc. The main news today about him is that he's going to get a huge increase in his allowance. And there is a Peter Brooks cartoon in the Times which is based on a take on the Marx Brothers, and the character, Nigel Farage's character, is saying, I don't care to belong to a bank. And that sentence is completed by the Marx brother that accepted me as a customer. It's like a take on the saying that I don't want to become a member of a club that would accept me as a member. So there are three editorials in the Times today. And on the birthdays today, the only Muslim, yeah, that they are celebrating is the Greek former singer Cat Stevens, also known as Yusuf Islam. She'll come to that in a second. On the second part two of the Times has got a piece, well, main discussion about why Hollywood actors are on strike. And what is Caitlin Moran talking about in her column, Celebrity Watch? The Diet Coke, there are two items on Diet Coke, and there is a piece about, of course, Hollywood strike, and there's a piece about Camilla, King Brian's within course wife. And about the Hollywood strike, Hollywood in peril. Whose side are you on? It's a piece by Richard Morrison. The standoff between actors and studios is about the future of entertainment by Richard Morrison. And there is a placard being held up by one of the strike supporters, let's say. A living wage is paramount. It's a take on the name of that studio, Paramount, which has fleeced the public of the world of billions, trillions of pounds and dollars over the years. So, we go back to the main issues of the times and let's take a look at how old Yusuf Islam is supposed to be. Well, in Israel, they have allowed the desecration of the Holy Quran again, and there was a protest by the Swedish envoy in Israel about that. We'll come back to that in a second. So they're giving his aid, Yusuf Islam, Cat Stevens, they're calling him within brackets. Activist and singer, morning has broken, etc. Now, when they call him Muslim activist, that is a completely untruthful, dishonest description. When I was campaigning against the racists in 1992 against in the Stratford School, a heavily Scottish accented white young male arrived at the address where the parents lived, parents of the particular children that attended the school, parents being Mr. Shaida and his wife and children. And the heavily Scottish accented male proceeded to say that he came there on behalf of Yusuf Islam in the cause of Islam. Now, I did tell him off and tell him to get lost. I shall do an essay or two about that. That as for the Yusuf Islam being a complete and utter phony, the campaign against the racists at the Stratford School that I organized in 1992 was precisely against the faith based agitation that actually excluded people of some faiths and based on some other faiths. The campaign that I organized was to universalize the campaign to establish the rights of parents objectively as against the dictatorial, corrupt, anti educational, ignorant behavior of a head teacher in post, which at that time was an smelling. I called her smelling of racism, smelling of corruption, and so on. So when this very heavily Scottish accented white male arrived at the address and began the description of his purpose as being linked with Mr. Yusuf Islam, wanting to get on board and make this campaign that I was running a campaign about Islam and Muslims. Now, as I had said not long before that to the man who had claimed to have established the Islamic Parliament, Khalim Siddiqui, I said to Khalim Siddiqui and his equally misguided and dishonest and stupid cabal that it was stupid to set up an outlet called Islamic Parliament when there was nobody except Yusuf Islam, Khalim Siddiqui, to populate the parliament. In any case, Khalim Siddiqui was dubious, to say it kindly. And I don't believe even now, that is, all these years ago, decades later, that the United Kingdom So when Cat Stevens sent on England, I gave him a piece of my mind, but I couldn't finish before somebody else who was present at the event kind of intervened and sort of said to me to let that be and let that guy go, which I did. So for the Times, Dirty Digger's Times today, to call him Yusuf Islam, the Muslim activist, is a sacrilege, is a lie. This guy is not a Muslim activist, he is an opportunist, and he's a liar, and he's a racist. As for the Swedish diplomat being ousted from Israel because he correctly objected to the latest sacrilege against the Holy Quran, which is being burned. This is something that should be put in context. The Swedish ambassador has been taking the stand, not the British one, not the German ones, most certainly not the French one. And I don't believe that the French or the German or the British state agencies would even notice what, in principle, stand the Swedish ambassador took against the behavior of the Israeli state in condoning the sacrilege and the burning of the Holy Quran. Now there is a piece of the photograph of King Brian with the alpaca, of course, but this is as false as every stunt by King Brian is. When the DEFRA attacks began against the baby angel Geronimo, the world's bestest alpaca, King Brian could not, Prince, as he was a Prince of Wales, could not have was in the news. So his appearing near the alpaca today is an insult to the alpacas, an insult to the cause of all the innocent baby ones that have been targeted by the depraved evilnesses called DEFRA. And there is no irony, there is no sign of any irony in the Times' depiction of King Brian next to the alpaca. Geronimo. But I don't think that Brian any of the notorious letters, handwritten letters, some of them, to DEFRA or any other part of the United Kingdom government. It's like the age of darkness where the baby angel Geronimo has been targeted by DEFRA and the criminals. And the only justice against the injustice of DEFRA, injustice of criminals who have targeted the baby angel Geronimo, demonizing him, the only chance of justice can be seen in the day of judgment. Indications of the kind of very small fraction of the way that these criminals will be found guilty are available in the fact that despite the elaborate pretension and cover up that he is a greedy, selfish, contemptuous king, Brian's contempt and greed are in the news. That is the absolutely central, undeniable fact. One in the 1960s, I first came across, I think photograph as well as the voice of the then Prince of Wales. I actually entertained my colleagues satirically, trying to imitate the speaking style of the then Prince of Wales. I'm not going to repeat that, but that is what I did, which means that I took an early kind of dislike because of the hypocrisy and the corruption in his personality. There is no such thing as monarchy. There cannot be. And the fact that all these media and the establishments and so on, including those who periodically refer to the poet laureate, these are all denials of inherent universal human equality and entertainment and entitlement. And this guy he keeps visiting these most obscure places. In the 1980s, Brian was foisted on the local population in hamlets by a visit he made of a very, very obscure part of is the name of that road. I'll find out in a minute. I don't want to mention the wrong name of this street. Essentially, it actually exposed the absurdity and almost persistent dependence by the so-called monarchy on the worst possible, lowest common denominator that they could find in any part of the community, the population. So that lowest common denominators would pay excessive deferential praise and appreciation to them. I mean, Brian only stood around, smirked and grinned as pictures were taken, which is what he knew would have been the main agenda. Shook hands with some of the lowest common denominators to be found in the local population. Some of the lowest common denominators then degenerated into Tower Hamlets councillors. Remember, this was happening in 1987, I think. In the 1980s, definitely. And in the 1980s, the only Tower Hamlets councillor from the Bangladeshi demography was Abbas Uddin Elias Halal. And about 2 years after that, 1989, I think, and I'm going without any checking of any of the facts and the archives, sole memory. But I didn't see Abbasuddin Elias Halal there. And those degenerated into Tower Hamlets councillors at the expense of the Bangladeshi part of the demography of the electorate were not doing anything intellectual, anything substantial, significant. So there were vacuums, vacuities, to use the phrase of Anthony Seldon, who has described Boris Johnson as being extraordinarily empty. So these people were empty, as was their overhyped guest, visitor. Now, what these people do, these degenerates, is to frame the moments photographed and spend considerable amounts of money in getting them framed, embossed, and displayed on the walls, wherever the walls that they would consider safe in their home. So I didn't do anything different. I took pictures, which is what I do, and I observed. And the observation was acute, and I'm sharing this observation nearly 40 years later. How is it that a country that is supposed to be made of descendants of the rulers of the empires, and apparently a part of the organizations called the Russell Group of Universities, Oxford, Cambridge, all these frightening, intimidating names. Frightening and intimidating based on the assumption that they contain rigor and intellectual objectivity, etc., etc. How is it that with those things in the background, they have this parade every day of the so-called members of the royal family? I think the most persistent and sick-makingly persistent element in the Fleet Street's promotion or promotions over the last year or so has been Kate Middleton. So much so that they have actually replaced the people in Hollywood and said that only when she appeared in Wimbledon did the Wimbledon sports tournament get turned into Hollywood because of her. Now, this is not degenerate, this is sick-makingly evil. And as is stated, asserted in the Holy Quran, innal batila kana zahuqa. Falsehood has disappeared and the truth has appeared. This is falsehood. Everything they're doing with overhyping Kate Middleton is on the side of the lies and falsehood. And those who are promoting the falsehood shall, of course, be exposed as so we shall be talking about all of those things more and more. And the fact that they are promoting on this scum, on the front page of this scum, this woman called Josie Gibson on the one. Look at this. Josie Gibson is the main space on the front page, splash. And then the second main page is the Kate Middleton's son, George at 10. And then, of course, a grinning nasty Farage, who has been the recipient of an apology from the so-called royal family, the Coutts Bank. And its main bureaucratic owners. And there are 2 pages spread in celebrating, pages 4 and 5, in celebrating the latest defeat, as the Sun wants to paint it as, latest defeat because they are reporting the bidding rivalry between the BBC and ITV for hiring this Josie Gibson, as if that is another significant, deadly defeat for the idea of the BBC. And then, of course, it was the scum that began the diversionary attack on the idea of the BBC by abusing the alleged conduct of Hugh Edwards. And there is this on page 8 of this come, there is this latest attack on the Argentinians, whom they pejoratively, insultingly call RGs. The RGs are told to back off. Our Isles, Falkland Fury. Now, how far is Falklands from the United Kingdom? We should check that one before answering that question. Well, that word Falklands is wrong. Actual name of the island is Malvinas Island. And so they're saying that the Argentinians have been told to back off. Rishi Sunak told Argentina to back off last night after their latest bid to claim the Falklands. The Prime Minister's spokesman said the islands would remain British in accordance with residents' near universal wish. Sunak spoke out after they were referred to as the Malvinas, the Argentine name, in a declaration between the European Union and the community of Latin American and Caribbean states. Now, Caribbean and Latin American, these are thousands of miles from the United Kingdom, from Britain. And there is no logic, there is no that the people of Latin American countries and the Caribbean countries actually support anything like the whether the British occupy the Falkland Islands. There is this If we look at the actual of maintaining the occupation by the United Kingdom of the island, you can see that it's a complete, absolute, obscene abuse. And there is not a squeal, there is no mention of any fact based, evidential reason for the United Kingdom to leave the island. And so this is only a taster. This is just a very short contextual reminder by us of the fact that this is representative sample of corruption and criminality that the so-called United Kingdom there is no evidence that Rishi Sunak is being challenged on the position that he has stated about the British claim on the Falklands, the Malvinas Island. And there is no reference to any of the treaties, international treaties, relating to the British colonialist and wasteful occupation of the Malvinas Island. We shall be talking about the banking and other issues in due course. This one is coming to an end. We shall bring it an end at 44 minutes at 08:25 GMT.